morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told how to voice the radio. And today, I think we need to go back to a discussion we had many months ago at this stage. I think we need to take another look at Arceus and Dialga Palkia. You see, this is, I think it's fair to say, the most controversial card in the game at the moment. It has generated the most amount of discussion. It has had a lot of people calling for it to be banned. Now, we've talked about that on this channel. We've talked about ADP and is this a problem? And we actually made that video on the 30th of March this year, which is interesting. It's not been uploaded today, but I'm recording the audio for this at least on the 30th of November, which is exactly 8 months later. Now, since I recorded that video, a bunch of people have been talking about whether it deserved to be banned, and frankly, I figured, you know what, we've kind of had that conversation. I don't know what we can add to it. Well, since then, we've had a few big online tournaments, and that has helped to illuminate things quite a bit. And also, I did a video just a week or so ago, depending on when this goes online. And in that video, I talked about the most dominant Pokemon TCG decks ever, and I did not put ADP on the list. Now, there's two reasons for that. Number one, it's not had its time. It's still legal. We are expecting, it is almost certain, to rotate out in September 2021. Or, August, September 2021, around about that time. So, we've still got a few months left for it to do its thing, so to speak. But also, and this is a very important point to note, it's not been dominant. Now, when I say it's not been dominant, I feel like I need to clarify what I mean by that statement. I don't mean it's not a good deck. I don't mean it's not a great deck. I don't mean that you couldn't call it the best deck in the format. I mean it hasn't been dominant in the way that, for instance, Gardevoir Gallade was dominant. If you were playing back in 2008, at the height of the Gardevoir Gallade phenomenon, there were basically two options. Either you played Gardevoir Gallade, or you didn't win. If we head on over to the World Championships in 2008, the world champion was Jason Klaczynski. What did he play? Obviously, he played Gardevoir Gallade. It was the kind of deck that everybody knew rolling into Worlds was going to win, and then it won Worlds. And I know there hasn't been a World Championships this year. Worlds didn't happen this year. But I do think that we can say there is an excellent chance that ADP would not have won the World Championships. And I'm not just saying that as a controversial statement. We've got evidence and data to back up the fact that there is a good chance, a very good chance, it would not have won the World Championships. Now, at this stage, we probably need to take a step backwards, and for those of you that are newer to the game, missed the controversy up to now, etc., we need to remind ourselves exactly what it is that Arceus Dialga Palkia actually does. It does, for what it's worth, have a really nice attack for free energy that accelerates free energy from your deck to your Pokemon in any way that you like, which is pretty gosh darn good. But it's mostly here for Altered Creation GX. 1 metal, 1 water energy, and for the rest of the game, all your attacks do an extra 30 damage. And for the rest of the game, every prize you take actually gives you 1 more prize. It is largely played with Zacian, and the reason Zacian is the best partner for it is extremely simple. It is the best partner for it because it's got an attack for free energy that does 230, 260 after ADP uses its GX attack, which is a lot for free energy, and also because it can use Metal Saucer, and it's got a great ability. Now, Metal Saucer attaches an energy from the discard pile to one of your bench metal Pokemon, like Zacian, and that will allow you to get Zacian up and rolling more easily, but you can also then energy switch it over to ADP, which is what you want to do. Hopefully you go first, You've got Viridian Forest, you get a Water Energy one turn, a Metal Energy another, and then you get the turn 2 GX attack. As a side note, if you're in this position, always attach the Metal Energy turn 1 if you can, because if that gets hit with, say, a Crushing Hammer, you can get it back far more easily with Metal Saucer than you can, for instance, get back and attach the Water Energy. Interesting thing to note. Now, if you do go second, however, you've still got the chance of Metal Saucer and Metal Energy to Zacian, and then Energy switch it over, attach Water for the turn, and there's your GX attack. And then you're basically playing unfairly. You've also got the Intrepid Sword ability that basically lets you draw 3 cards, but any of them that are Metal Energy you may attach to Zacian, which is kind of awesome. Again, it's energy that can be energy switched over to ADP, but it also gives you extra consistency to get that GX attack rolling. We've seen ADP played with other stuff. We've seen it see a fair bit of success with Spiritomb, a really nice single energy, single prize basic Pokemon that for 1 energy, it's not as good as it used to be, but you can put damage on it using the ability, 1 per turn, and then the attack does 10 damage plus 30 more for each damage counter on it. But you would use Rainbow Energy, which puts damage on, and Hustle Belt, that if you've got damage on and 30 or less HP remaining, does an extra 60 damage, and you could hit big damage quickly. But we've lost both Hustle Belt and Rainbow Energy, and as much as I love Spiritomb, and I do, it is not as good as it used to be. Honestly, it sees play of a whole bunch of stuff, but Zacian is the main one. So, let's go back to my claim a moment ago that I made, when I said that I believe there is an excellent chance that it would not have won the World Championships. And what we can basically do is we can look at actual tournaments that have actually happened, that ADP could have won, and see how they actually ended up. None of them were won by Zacian ADP. Now, I need to be very clear about which tournament it is that I am using here, alright? We're not using fan-run tournaments. We are using the biggest, most official tournaments we've got. The one is from Limitless TCG, but that's a little bit different. We'll get there in a moment. I know there have been copious amounts of online tournaments, many of which have been won by Zacian ADP, but they don't necessarily have the audience or the qualification or whatever. So it really is important to, I think, stick to essentially the more prestigious, more official tournament as far as we can get. Now, as we go through here, the first one we really had was a Limitless Invitational. Now, I'm putting the least stock into this, but I think it's important to have a look anyway. Now, this was played in the format Ultra Prism to Rebel Clash. That is to say, pre-rotation without Darkness Ablaze legal. Now, we don't actually know what would have happened at the World Championships. It was cancelled too quickly. We don't know if Darkness Ablaze would have been legal at Worlds. Remember, Worlds was slated to be 1 week before it would usually be legal, but they could have made an exception. And we don't know if Worlds would have been pre or post rotation. They have started occasionally rotating before Worlds, but we honestly don't know. We can't even suppose about that. We have no idea. But if we look at the top 8 from the Limitless Invitational, bearing in mind there were multiple weeks of about 1,000 people tournaments that you had to play in to qualify for this. It was an extremely difficult one to get into, and you'll notice that first place was Spiritomb, and second place was Spiritomb. And I should add, these are Spiritomb decks that did not play Arceus and Dialga and Palkia GX. And as we continue down the list, we can see that there is one Zacian ADP that comes in the top 8 of this tournament. And that's it. Hardly strikes me as the most dominant deck. And again, this is why I've said in my video recently, or said by omission, I suppose, that Zacian ADP was not a dominant deck. It did not dominate that tournament. We can move on to the Pokemon Online Global Championships. Now, again, this was unofficial, but It was played by a very large number of players. It was the closest thing we really had to just an open big tournament around the time of Worlds. And this was pre-rotation, but did include Darkness Ablaze. And you'll notice it was won by Pikachu and Zekrom. And again, there was a Zacian ADP, Pablo Meza, very good player, very lovely dude. Did take 6th place with Zacian ADP. But again, you're talking 1 in top 8, none in top 4. Hardly the mark of a dominant deck. Now, the closest we had to an official World Championships was the Players' Cup, which demanded that you qualify through online events on PTCGO, and then it was the top 256 from each region, 128 in Oceania, and they went to a big invitational at the end of it, and the invitational, when we came down to it, was post-rotation with Darkness Ablaze. So you'll notice we've actually got 3 slightly different formats here. We have pre-rotation without Darkness Ablaze, pre-rotation with, and post-rotation with. And I know people have problems with the first Players' Cup in that if you didn't have event tickets on PTCGO, it was hard to compete. But by the same token, plenty of people qualified with far fewer tickets than people thought were needed. And it was the closest we've had to a big official online World Championships. It ain't Worlds, but it's the closest we got. And this was a little bit better. We saw Victor Freitas taking 3rd place with Zacian ADP, and Hitor Gomez taking 5th place with Zacian ADP. So we did see 2 in the top 8, but once again, it didn't even make the final. Now, there is one other tournament we can look at, which again was in a different format to all the others. This was a Japanese tournament, the Champions League in Yokohama, which was played in essentially Ultra Prism to Team Up, although that's not strictly true, but close enough. And you'll see that it was won by Blacephalon, and that there was Shogo Fujiwara, who took 14th place with Zacian ADP. Now, I've just shown you 4 different tournaments in 4 different formats, all in and around the Worlds format. Although, to be fair, that Japanese tournament was played in a very similar tournament or format to what we saw with the first tournament, the Limitless Invitational. By the way, I said to team up, I meant to kind of Vivid Voltage, so slightly further on than we were. But the point is, none of these were won by ADP. Over these 4 tournaments, ADP saw 0 places in the final and 1 top 4 finish. And I'm sorry, but there is absolutely no way you can tell me it is a dominant deck that is wrecking the metagame if the 4 biggest, most prestigious tournaments we had saw 1 top 4 finish for Zacian ADP. I'm not buying it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's be clear. I am in no way, shape, or form saying that this is a bad deck. It is a great... It's not a good deck. It's a great deck. It's a phenomenal deck. It is clearly one of the best decks in the format. Maybe the Players' Cup 2 will be completely overrun with Zacian ADP, and at that stage, I'll have to turn around and go, yeah, you know what? It is now potentially a dominant deck. And I made my arguments in my previous video about my single prize decks like Excadrill that just can't stand up to it, because all of a sudden they're 2 prizes rather than 1, Excadrill when they get KO'd, and that's not fair, etc. And all of these are fair points, but I made them in my previous video. I'll link it in the description, save repeating myself. But I do think it was important to look at the question of whether ADP is a dominant deck and whether it deserves to be banned. And if we look purely at objective tournament results here, the answer is a loud, resounding no. There are other arguments to be made about it restricting deck choice and it ruining single prize decks, and as someone who exclusively plays single prize decks, bearing in mind I qualified for the Players' Cup 2 playing entirely Excadrill, I did get 1 point with Spiritomb, but that deck was terrible, and I didn't need that 1 point, so it was fine. My 1 point I literally donked in one game, and that was the only win I got. It was not a good deck. It didn't go very well. But my point is, there are other arguments to be made about it restricting the metagame and things of that nature. But if we're looking purely at whether it deserves to be banned and whether it's a dominant deck, ADP is not only not one of the most dominant decks we've ever seen, right now, it ain't a dominant deck at all. And hopefully I've shown you actual data and results to back that up. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. It's a video that we didn't need to make before, but I think we did need to make now. But as always, I'd love to hear from you, lovely ladies and gentlemen, with what you think about ADP and how good you think it is. So let me know in the comment section, would ya? Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.